how the human body collides with these molecules is really, it's very technical, and these are phytonutrients in this cosmeceuticals and nutraceutical sense. And what they're treating is they're treating a body system. So they're not treating symptoms as much as this body system. And this body system is called the endocannabinoid system, and is there to really modulate against the body's stress response. So sympathetic to parasympathetic, and the modulation between those two.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Christopher Gavigan. He's the founder, previous CEO, and current advisor of PRIMA. Christopher, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Excited to have you today. So, Christopher, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh gosh, where do you begin on this big type question? I'm a father of 4, and I get really excited about the creative expression and the power and the responsibility that brands hold, particularly in moving the conversation and shifting paradigms and really challenging status quo. So over the course of my career, initially I spent it early in the world of the NGO space, collecting data and science out of medicine and academia. I am most excited to lean into and being curious about how the human body collides with nature and our environment, which is not always out there. It's what we put on and around our bodies. And there's both negative and health consequences that come from those experiences. And so I like educating people specifically, how do we uphold health? And both the NGO space and the 2 companies that I have started have been squarely in those areas.
Yeah, and why don't we dive in? Tell me a little bit about those companies.
Let's go in.
Let's do it.
The first one is The Honest Company, and I launched that with other co-founders in 2012, and that was specifically really bringing the world of natural, non-toxic, safe, and healthier for families, particularly kids and moms. And that was a pioneer brand in the sense that we weren't the only early mover in the space, but we were the brand that was there to really challenge incumbents and shift conversations, particularly around safety and purity, what was sitting on store shelves. And the brand was, really unique in the sense that we had exceptional products, but we were really a thought leadership and a peace of mind brand. So content and awareness building was always what we focused on. And then having customers that were loyalist and passionate, but almost in a cult-like fashion. Once you learn, it's hard to unlearn some of how the older brands are not really on your side, right? What are their priorities? How have they shifted over the decades? And so The Honest Company was really there to prod and promote a healthier, safer you and product at the end of the day. And it achieved and continues to do phenomenally well, and incredibly proud of that brand and what it's doing and what it's done in the marketplace.
That's terrific. And then second,
like most recently, and we just transacted on it, in fact, but after 4 years of building that brand, that was something that this is a brand now, PRIMA. PRIMA is an exciting one because I'm impatient and I'm really compelled to do something. And this was a brand that was really a thought leader when it comes to the science and really how the body is colliding with molecules in therapeutic value. But it's always, it's always a challenge when you get a first mover category like cannabinoids or cannabis, and what some of the residual past and stigma, how that really impacts the overall market and people's perceptions of what things are and aren't. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of work that we did on building credibility and trust and relationship, both at the legislative level, at the retail level, and most importantly, at the consumer level. And, you know, it was really for us at Prima, it was about unlocking the intelligence of nature and really driving an acceptance of these plant compounds that exist in society, as well as we actually naturally and natively produce these compounds endogenously in our own bodies. And so Prima is it's a therapeutics company that was specifically aimed and targeted at 3 specific categories. So therapeutic body care, facial beauty and skincare, as well as supplementation. So mood modulation, inflammatory response, sleep, promoting quality and healthy and long and deep sleep, and really targeting healing and restoration for bodies that are achieving the realities of aches and pains that we all go through.
I think that's terrific. And I really like those 3 different areas that you were able to target. And I was curious to hear kind of like a little bit more about each of those 3 areas. But you also did, you know, pique my interest when you talked about building trust and talking about common misconceptions. So let's talk a little bit more about those 3 areas and let's dive into that.
Yeah. Well, how the human body collides with these molecules is really, it's very technical, and these are phytonutrients in this cosmeceuticals and nutraceutical sense. And what they're treating is they're treating a body system. So they're not treating symptoms as much as this body system. And this body system is called the endocannabinoid system, and is there to really modulate against the body's stress response. So sympathetic to parasympathetic, and the modulation between those two. And this is called homeostasis. And so homeostasis is achieved, or balance is more well achieved, when that system is in a better state of balance. And this is one of the largest cellular receptor networks inside the entire body. It exists in musculature and joints and neural tissue, along organs and hormonal pathways. And so it's a really, really positive system. And, you know, as an entrepreneur, you're always trying to tell a deeper story. And I believe that any great brand is really, it sits deeply in its science and innovation and its technical capabilities. But you're also trying to build you're trying to wrap your arms as a brand around the customer, building trust and relationship. And that comes through consistency, that comes through a tone and a manner that I get really excited about crafting and refining over time. And that eventually is building trust. You know, the most broadly overused word in today's marketplace, particularly around brand and brand speak, is the word authentic. And authentic is only something that is built over time through consistent engagement. And I think that trust is a reflection in that paradigm and in that spectrum of authenticity. And so the world of honesty and trust and truth telling, and really a deep advocacy for people, as well as the planet, is really where I like to build and craft and refine and design.
And, you know, to your point about that authenticity and trust in the cannabinoid industry, how do you work to break that stigma of, you know, just it not being, you know, a tool, or, you know, a supplement?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's the gray market and shadow economy, black market economy past is still there, right? It still exists. And you know, I'm not judging it as much as I'm acknowledging its presence, and that it was forced there over 100 years ago through legislation and through misinterpretation. It's a fantastic way, because these are medicines, these are plant medicines, these are natural compounds, these aren't synthetically derived. And but unfortunately, the caretakers of that have been charlatans and green rushers and folks for outlaws from the past. And so what is it it's gonna take a level of deep knowing, and as well as taking a refined, elevated approach. And so quality, safety, purity, testing, third-party quality marks, really leaning into the legislative bodies of health and sciences and departments, both at state and national levels, and the regulatory work, and being mindful of claims, right? These aren't panaceas, and these aren't going to just heal everything, right? They're targeted compounds. When leveraged and used the appropriate dose and for the appropriate target, they can be effective, but they're not going to do everything. They're not going to cure your cancer. And so we have to be mindful on how we speak to these and the appropriateness. And sadly, early days, some folks just mishandled some of those conversations, and they or knowingly took advantage of it. So we're here to unify and elevate and add some credibility and a new trusted voice into the conversation.
You used a few words like quality, safety, credibility in kind of what you were just saying. Do you think that those are three of the most common misconceptions, not necessarily about Prima, but about the industry in general, that it's not high quality, it's not safe, and it's not credible?
Yes. Look, no one's ever died, and no one will ever die from a cannabinoid overdose. You just can't get enough THC in the body that would harm the body, because our body naturally processes them, right? You might have some, THC is one of the cannabinoids. There are 120 plus other ones. CBD is one. Most people talk about CBD as a class of cannabinoids, and that's fine. But THC is the only one that gets you high or gives you a psychoactive effect. All the other ones are in the wellness category. And so testing for potency and dose is important. The fullness of that spectrum, and if you're isolating one cannabinoid as opposed to a host of cannabinoids, that differs from plant to plant and from brand to brand. And what's the hardest thing in the space is that the body processes, we know another recreational substance that we all use. It's called alcohol. I don't use it, actually. Stopped 5+ years ago. But alcohol, the body is processed as a poison. So what the body does through its neurochemical response is it attacks and dilutes and start managing that as a poison. Well, cannabinoids are not seen as a poison. They're leverageable molecules. And so the body processes it differently for you, for me, for what we need. So sometimes the consistency of response is not always there, and the dose from one session or one sitting is not always the same. So no, that's why I always caution folks to start slow and go with the brands that you trust the most, and that have the most to tell you about the product and about their story, about the why, and the other host of other ingredients, because the other ingredients matter as well. But it is it's a growing space. I'm incredibly, Prima is one of the top leaders. We've got distribution in Sephora and Vitamin Shop, and leverageable relationship with Goop and Whole Foods and Nordstrom. So it's done quite well for itself, and a lot of that work is about teaching and bringing those legal teams and sales and buying and distribution teams up to speed at those retail levels, and then telling a story time and time again. And these are generational stories. It will take generational shifts to reduce stigma. But that's coming, and that takes time, and it takes brands and entrepreneurs and advocates and people who've had a good experience and tell 5 of their friends of what that experience was and why.
And you mentioned something about, again, that building the trust, right? And, generational change and needing to shift that. Do you think, and kind of going back to that, the quality, the safety, the credibility, do you think those are 3 key qualities that really separate Prima from its competition? Like you said, you're in Sephora, you've got, all of these partnerships you're leveraging. Do you think that that's one of the ways that this holistic kind of approach is how Prima is really able to separate itself?
Yeah, we've done a really good job at releasing quality standards and SOPs, and working with those retail partners to help them on their sourcing and accountability metrics on how to test for third-party certifications and approvals, what tests should be done. So it is about show me, don't tell me. And PRIMA has really done it. It's there is an ethical and a moral obligation and an industry obligation, honoring the past and the history of these and the ancient wisdom of these plants, and bringing them and fast tracking these into modern botanical sciences and therapeutics, and doing it with research and science and trusted advisors and medicine, and really doing that work. And that takes again, it takes time, but it takes you willing to be highly transparent and work as an industry to move these standards forwards, and do it in a way, in a fashion that, again, brings the consumer along for the journey.
I think that's terrific. Well, Christopher, as we start to wrap up this podcast, where can people go to learn more?
You always can go to prima.co to learn about the brand and the product. You can find me on LinkedIn, and happy to have conversations and connections there with entrepreneurs and founders, both in this industry and others. And then I'm also on Intro, which is a platform, intro.co, which is a platform where you can schedule time to talk to me as well. So I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to talk about PRIMA and some of my background, and look forward to connecting with other folks in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fantastic to have you. And I'm not sure, I want to give you an opportunity. Do you have any parting words, any advice that you want to leave our listeners with? Anything about PRIMA, the industry in general?
Gosh, that's a great question. I know, I mean, right now it's in a time, well, I'll say this. In a stressful time, I mean, coming out of COVID, and we're coming up on 3.5, 4+ years going in beyond COVID. Those were stressful times. And what's really interesting me right now is this idea that we're in a digital world now, more connected than ever, but farther apart than ever. And the Surgeon General's, and I really give him and compliments to the administration of really having the conversation around loneliness, that being the epidemic of today. I really believe stress and loneliness and how we manage those both personally and how we are wired for human connection, and how we take care of ourselves in difficult times is really about connecting with good people, getting out in nature, and really connecting with our bodies in a more natural setting, and doing the little things that it takes. It's not that hard. Most of these healthcare hacks that people talk about are really free. Good quality sleep, hydration. So do the little things that are really going to have a big long-term impact for you.
The little things add up to big things. Well, awesome. Well, Christopher, like I said, this has been a terrific conversation. I appreciate all of your insights into, the industry, your guidance on, starting, your own companies. I think this was a fantastic conversation, and I really appreciate you being on Business Ninjas today.
Thank you, Kelsey. It's good seeing you.
Yeah, great to have you.